Imagine a man running through a vast empty field, his eyes fixed on a distant horizon, his breath labored, his legs aching. He is chasing something, a mirage, a vision of happiness that seems to move further away with every step he takes. The more he runs, the further it drifts, always just beyond his reach. This is how most people live their lives according to the Stoics, forever chasing happiness as if it were a prize to be captured, a destination to be reached. But what if the chase itself is the problem? What if the very act of pursuing happiness is what keeps it perpetually out of reach? Epictetus, who rose from slavery to the heights of Stoic wisdom, believed that the pursuit of external happiness was a trap, a never-ending cycle of desire and disappointment. "Seek not for things to happen as you wish," he said, "but wish for things to happen as they do, and you will be serene." For Epictetus, true contentment was not found in chasing pleasures, wealth, or external validation, but in accepting life as it is, in embracing each moment without demanding it to be different. He taught his students to question their desires, to ask themselves, "Why do I want this? What do I believe it will give me that I do not already possess?" The Stoic must learn to turn inward, to shift their focus from the external to the internal, to recognize that happiness is not a place to be reached, but a state of mind to be cultivated regardless of circumstances. Seneca, who lived amidst the opulence and treachery of Nero's court, observed that most people spent their lives pursuing things that would never bring them lasting contentment. "You act like mortals in all that you fear," he said, "and like immortals in all that you desire." Seneca warned that the endless chase for happiness was a distraction, a way to avoid facing the uncomfortable truth that no amount of wealth, power, or pleasure could fill the void within. "It is not the man who has too little," he said, "but the man who craves more. That is poor." Seneca believed that the secret to true happiness was not in acquiring more, but in desiring less, in cultivating a mind that was calm and untroubled regardless of external conditions. He advised his students to practice voluntary simplicity, to deliberately go without comforts and luxuries, to remind themselves that they could be content with little, that happiness was not in the possession of things but in the mastery of one's desires. The man in the field finally collapses to the ground, his breath heavy, his heart pounding. The horizon remains as distant as ever, and in that moment he realizes that the more he chases happiness, the further it slips away. He closes his eyes, takes a deep breath, and whispers, "What if I stopped running?" In that moment of stillness, he begins to see that happiness was never in the horizon, never in the destination, but in the present moment, in the very breath he is taking, in the simple act of being, in the acceptance of what is rather than the pursuit of what could be. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome amidst constant chaos and crisis, understood that the relentless pursuit of happiness was a path that led to emptiness. "If you are distressed by anything external," he wrote in his Meditations, "the pain is not due to the thing itself but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Imagine a man standing on the balcony of a grand palace, looking down upon the sprawling city of Rome. He has everything, wealth, power, the adoration of his people, yet a deep sense of emptiness gnaws at his soul. Despite all he has achieved, he cannot shake the feeling that something is missing, that happiness is a prize just out of reach, a destination he has yet to find. But Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire and yet felt the weight of the world pressing down upon him, realized that the more one chases happiness, the more it eludes them. "People seek retreats for themselves in the country, by the sea, or in the mountains," he said, "but nowhere can you find a more peaceful and trouble-free retreat than in your own mind." For Marcus, the Stoic practice was not about pursuing happiness, but about cultivating tranquility, a state of inner calm that remained unshaken by external events, a peace that could be found even in the midst of war, betrayal, and suffering. Epictetus, who had been born a slave and endured years of abuse, knew firsthand that happiness was not found in external circumstances, but in the way one responded to them. When you are offended at any man's fault, he said, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger. Epictetus believed that the Stoic must learn to detach from the illusion that happiness is something to be attained through possessions, achievements, or the approval of others. Instead, he taught that true contentment lay in self-mastery, in the ability to remain calm, composed and centered no matter what life threw at you. What upsets people, he said, is not things themselves but their judgments about these things. The Stoic must learn to reframe their perspective, to shift their focus from what is lacking to what is already present, to cultivate a sense of gratitude for the simple everyday moments that so often go unnoticed. The man on the balcony closes his eyes, the sounds of the city fading into the background. He takes a deep breath, feeling the cool night air against his skin, the gentle breeze that whispers through the courtyard below. In that moment, he realizes that the happiness he has been chasing is not out there in the world, but within, in the quiet space of his own mind, in the stillness that comes when one stops running, stops striving, stops reaching for what they do not have, and begins to appreciate what they already possess. For Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and the Stoics, happiness was not a destination, but a state of being. A choice to find contentment in the present moment, to embrace life as it is rather than as one wishes it to be, to discover that the only true source of peace is the mind that can remain calm amidst the storm. Seneca, the statesman and philosopher who witnessed both the heights of wealth and the depths of ruin, understood that the pursuit of happiness was a double-edged sword. You act like mortals in all that you fear, he said, and like immortals in all that you desire. Imagine a man standing in the center of a lavish banquet hall, surrounded by gold, fine wine, and the laughter of those who fawn over him. He raises a glass to his lips, but the wine tastes bitter, the laughter sounds hollow, the gold feels heavy. Despite the opulence, he feels empty, restless, dissatisfied. Seneca, who served as an advisor to one of Rome's most unpredictable emperors, knew that the pursuit of pleasure was a path that led to discontent. It is not the man who has too little, he said, but the man who craves more. That is poor. For Seneca, the Stoic must learn to see through the illusion of happiness as something to be acquired, something to be possessed, something to be earned through external means. He taught that true contentment was not found in the abundance of things, but in the simplicity of the mind, in the ability to be at peace regardless of one's circumstances. Epictetus, who had been born into slavery and endured unimaginable suffering, echoed this sentiment. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life, he said. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Epictetus believed that the constant pursuit of happiness was a distraction, a way to avoid facing the reality that happiness was never in the things one chased, but in the state of mind one cultivated. He urged his students to question every desire, to ask themselves, why do I want this? What do I believe it will give me? What will remain of me if I do not get it? The Stoic must learn to detach, to release the grip on desires that enslave the mind, to step back from the endless cycle of craving and find stillness in the present moment. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome during its most turbulent years, understood that the world was a constant flux of gain and loss, victory and defeat, praise and condemnation. If you are pained by any external thing, he said, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. And it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now. Marcus knew that the mind was the only true refuge, a place where one could find peace even as the world burned around them. The man in the banquet hall lowers his glass, his eyes scanning the room, the people, the glittering gold. He feels the weight of his own discontent, the ache of a soul that has been chasing illusions for too long. And in that moment he remembers Seneca's words, "You may delay, but time will not." The Stoic does not wait for happiness to arrive. He chooses it in the present, in the simple act of letting go, in the quiet acceptance of what is, in the realization that what he has been searching for was never out there in the world but within, in the mind that can remain calm, content, and complete no matter what surrounds it. Epictetus, who spent years in chains yet found freedom within, taught that the relentless pursuit of happiness was a form of slavery, a self-imposed prison built from endless desires and unmet expectations. "Who is your master?" he asked. "Anyone who has power over what you desire or fear." Imagine a man standing in the middle of a bustling marketplace, his eyes darting from one stall to another, his heart racing with envy as he watches others acquire things he cannot afford. He feels like a beggar in a sea of abundance, his worth tied to what he lacks, his happiness dependent on what he does not possess. But Epictetus, who had nothing yet needed nothing, believed that true freedom was not the absence of hardship, but the absence of craving. "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life," he said. "It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." For Epictetus, the Stoic must learn to sever the chains of desire, to untangle the mind from the illusion that happiness is found in more possessions, more status, more approval. He taught that every desire was a shackle, every craving a chain, every pursuit of external happiness a distraction from the only thing that truly mattered: the state of one's own mind. Seneca, who had seen fortunes rise and fall, understood that the man who tied his happiness to external things was a man who would forever be a slave. "It is not the man who has too little," he said, "but the man who craves more that is poor." Seneca advised his followers to practice voluntary poverty, to spend days living as if they had nothing, to sleep on the ground, to eat the simplest food, to remind themselves that happiness was not in what one had, but in what one could live without. "Set aside a certain number of days," he said, "during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself all the while, 'Is this the condition I feared?'" For Seneca, the Stoic life was not about renouncing the world, but about transcending it, about detaching from the illusion that happiness could be bought, acquired, or achieved through external means. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome with both a sword and a pen, echoed this sentiment. "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts," he wrote. "Therefore guard accordingly and take care that you entertain no notions unsuitable to virtue and reasonable nature." Marcus believed that the mind was the true fortress, a place where no one could reach unless one allowed them in, a place where true contentment could be found regardless of what happened outside its walls. The man in the marketplace closes his eyes, the noise and clamor fading away. He takes a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on his skin, the ground firm beneath his feet, the simple rhythm of his own breath. In that moment, he understands that happiness was never in the things he chased, but in the present moment, in the stillness within, in the peace that comes from wanting nothing and needing even less. For the Stoics, the pursuit of happiness was not a chase, but a choice to find contentment in what is rather than in what could be, a choice to remain free from the chains of desire, a choice to let go of what was never truly in one's control. Seneca once said, "You act like mortals in all that you fear and like immortals in all that you desire." Imagine a man sitting alone in a grand hall, surrounded by all the wealth and luxury he has accumulated over the years. His walls are adorned with gold, his table set with the finest food, his garments woven with threads of silk. Yet despite all he possesses, his heart is heavy, his mind restless, his soul unsatisfied. He has spent his life chasing happiness, believing that each new acquisition would finally bring him the contentment he seeks. But Seneca, who had witnessed the rise and fall of emperors and the fleeting nature of fortune, knew that the more one chases happiness, the further it slips away. The greatest obstacle to living, he said, is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today. For Seneca, the Stoic must learn to stop chasing what he does not have and start appreciating what he already possesses. "You may delay," he said, "but time will not." Epictetus, who had endured the chains of slavery and the harsh treatment of a cruel master, understood that true happiness was not found in things, but in the way one perceived them. "It is not events that disturb people, he said, but their judgments about them." Epictetus taught that the Stoic must learn to detach from the illusion that happiness could be found in external things, wealth, fame, power, praise. Instead, he urged his students to turn inward, to seek contentment not in what they owned, but in who they were. "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid," he said, reminding them that the world would always try to convince them that more was needed to be happy, that they were not enough as they were, that happiness was a destination to be reached rather than a state to be cultivated. Marcus Aurelius, who had commanded armies and ruled over vast territories, knew that the pursuit of external happiness was a form of slavery, a trap that kept the mind perpetually discontent. "People seek retreats for themselves in the country, by the sea, or in the mountains," he wrote, "but nowhere can you find a more peaceful and trouble-free retreat than in your own mind." Marcus believed that the only true refuge was the mind, the only true happiness, the calm that could be cultivated regardless of what was happening outside. The man in the grand hall lowers his gaze, his eyes falling on the gold that no longer shines, the food that no longer satisfies, the wealth that no longer brings joy. In that moment, he understands that the happiness he has been chasing was never in the things he acquired, but in the peace he failed to cultivate within. For Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus, the Stoic path was not about renouncing wealth, but about renouncing the need for it. Not about rejecting pleasure, but about detaching from the illusion that pleasure could bring lasting contentment. The Stoic must learn to see happiness not as a prize to be pursued, but as a state of being to be chosen. A choice to find peace in the present, to accept what is, to let go of what is not. To understand that the only true wealth is the mind that can remain calm, content and complete amidst all that is gained and all that is lost. Epictetus, who rose from the depths of slavery to the heights of Stoic wisdom, taught that the relentless pursuit of happiness was a distraction from life's true purpose, the cultivation of virtue and inner peace. "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life," he said. "It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Imagine a man standing before a towering mansion, his eyes fixed on the lavish home, his mind filled with envy and longing. He feels the weight of his own inadequacy pressing down like a heavy cloak, the sting of not having what others possess gnawing at his soul. But Epictetus, who had owned nothing yet possessed everything, believed that the man who tied his worth to possessions would forever be a slave to desire. "You are a little soul carrying around a corpse," he said, urging his students to detach from the illusion that happiness could be bought, owned, or achieved through external means. For Epictetus, true freedom was the ability to want nothing and need even less, to stand amidst all that the world offered and say, "I am enough as I am." Seneca, who had seen the rise and fall of emperors, understood that the man who spent his life chasing happiness would never find it. For the act of chasing implied that happiness was always somewhere else. In the next job, the next relationship, the next achievement. While we are postponing, life speeds by, he said, reminding his followers that the present moment was all they truly owned, that the future was a mirage, a place that existed only in the mind. Seneca advised his students to practice daily reflection, to ask themselves each night before sleep, "What did I do well today? Where did I fall short? How could I have lived more fully?" This practice was not about self-criticism, but about self-awareness, a way to anchor oneself in the present, and to let go of the illusion that happiness was a destination to be reached rather than a state of mind to be cultivated right now. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled Rome with both a sword and a pen, knew that the pursuit of happiness was a trap that ensnared even the most powerful of men. "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts," he wrote, "and nothing else." Marcus believed that the Stoic must learn to guard their thoughts like a fortress, to protect the mind from the incessant chatter of the outside world, from the voices that insisted more was needed to be happy, from the illusions that promised fulfillment but delivered only emptiness. "If you are pained by anything external," he said, "it is not the thing itself that disturbs you but your judgment about it." The man standing before the mansion closes his eyes, takes a deep breath, and asks himself, "What am I truly chasing?" In that moment, he realizes that the happiness he seeks is not inside the walls of that house, but within himself, in the stillness of his own mind, in the choice to let go of desire, to embrace what is, to find contentment in the present moment. For Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus, the Stoic life was not about amassing wealth or avoiding pain, but about cultivating inner calm, about choosing freedom over attachment, about recognizing that the only true source of happiness was the mind that could remain at peace amidst all that was gained and all that was lost. Seneca, who had witnessed the rise and fall of Rome's most powerful men, understood that the endless pursuit of happiness was a futile endeavor, a chase that left men exhausted and empty. "You ask what is the proper limit to a person's wealth," he said. "It is first to have what is necessary, and second to have what is enough." Imagine a man standing on the balcony of his estate, overlooking acres of land he owns, surrounded by luxuries that most could only dream of. Yet despite all he possesses, his heart is heavy, his mind restless, his soul unsatisfied. He has spent his life chasing happiness, believing that each new acquisition, each new victory, each new possession would finally bring him the contentment he seeks. But Seneca, who had once been exiled and stripped of his wealth, knew that the man who needed more to be happy would never find peace. "It is not the man who has too little," he said, "but the man who craves more, that is poor." For Seneca, the Stoic must learn to redefine wealth, to see it not as a collection of possessions, but as a state of mind, a sense of contentment that could not be shaken by the rise and fall of fortune. Epictetus, who had once been chained and beaten as a slave, knew that the relentless pursuit of happiness was a prison built by one's own desires. "If you want to be free," he said, "do not wish for things to happen as you desire, but wish for them to happen as they do." Imagine a man sitting alone in a dark room, surrounded by the shattered remnants of his dreams, a business that failed, a relationship that ended, a life that fell apart. He stares blankly at the wall, his mind replaying every moment of his downfall, every misstep, every mistake. He cannot stop thinking, "If only things had gone differently. If only I had more. If only I had done better." But Epictetus, who had learned to endure suffering without bitterness, understood that the root of all misery was not in what had happened, but in the refusal to accept it. "It is not events that disturb people," he said, "but their judgments about them." For Epictetus, the Stoic must learn to let go of the illusion that happiness was in what could have been, and to embrace what is, to stop chasing after what was lost and to accept what remains. Seneca, who had been exiled, betrayed, and forced to take his own life, knew that the mind was the only true refuge in a world of uncertainty. "You may delay," he said, "but time will not." Seneca believed that the Stoic must learn to release their grip on the past, to stop replaying old failures and regrets, to stop wishing for a life that no longer exists. "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end," he said, urging his followers to see every loss not as a punishment but as an opportunity to start anew, to rebuild, to reshape one's life with greater clarity and purpose. Seneca advised his students to practice daily reflection, to ask themselves each night before sleep, "What did I do well today? Where did I fall short? How could I live more fully tomorrow?" For Seneca, the past was not a prison but a teacher, a source of wisdom that could only be accessed by letting go of the desire for things to have been different and accepting the reality of what is. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled over a crumbling empire and witnessed countless betrayals, knew that the pursuit of happiness through external means was a distraction from life's true purpose, the cultivation of inner peace. "If you are pained by anything external," he wrote, "it is not the thing itself that disturbs you, but your judgment about it." Marcus believed that the Stoic must learn to focus solely on what they can control, their thoughts, their actions, their responses, and to let go of everything else. "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts," he said, "and nothing else." The man in the dark room closes his eyes, takes a deep breath, and begins to let go of what might have been, of the dreams that never materialized, of the life that once seemed so perfect but was always an illusion. In that moment, he realizes that the happiness he seeks is not in the things he lost, but in the freedom to let them go, in the courage to accept what is, in the strength to rise again with a mind unburdened by desire and a heart unchained from the past. For Epictetus, Seneca, and Marcus, the Stoic life was not about chasing happiness, but about finding contentment in the present, in the simple act of letting go, in the profound realization that the only true source of peace is the mind that can remain calm amidst the ruins of what once was and the uncertainty of what will be. Seneca, who had witnessed the rise and fall of emperors and the fleeting nature of fortune, believed that the endless pursuit of happiness was a cruel illusion, a chase that led men further away from contentment. "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today," he said, urging his followers to let go of the illusion that happiness was somewhere in the future, somewhere just beyond reach. Imagine a man standing in the middle of a vast, empty room, his eyes fixed on a distant door that never opens. He tells himself, "Once I achieve that, then I will be happy. Once I get there, then my life will finally begin." But Seneca, who had lost everything and rebuilt himself more than once, knew that the Stoic path was not about waiting for life to begin, but about living fully in the present, about finding contentment not in what might be, but in what is. "Begin at once to live," he said, "and count each separate day as a separate life." For Seneca, each day was a complete life in itself, a chance to act with virtue, to practice gratitude, to find peace in the simplest of moments. Epictetus, who had been born a slave and endured a life of suffering, echoed this sentiment. "If you are ever tempted to look for outside approval," he said, "look to see if you have turned inwards to examine your own self." Epictetus believed that the Stoic must learn to detach from the illusion that happiness was something to be earned, achieved, or granted by external forces. Instead, he taught that the only true source of contentment was the mind that could remain calm, centered and complete regardless of circumstances. "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you," he said, "whose presence calls forth your best." For Epictetus, the Stoic life was not a life free from challenges, but a life in which every challenge was an opportunity to practice detachment, to step back from the desires that kept the mind in a state of perpetual unrest, to release the need for more and to embrace the simple act of being. Marcus Aurelius, who had ruled an empire amidst constant chaos, knew that life was a series of fleeting moments, each one a chance to practice virtue, each one a chance to rise above the noise and find stillness within. "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to throw away," he wrote. "Death stands at your elbow. Be good for something while you live." Marcus believed that the Stoic must learn to see life as a river, ever flowing, ever changing, a series of moments that could not be grasped or held but only lived, each one a gift that would never come again. The man in the empty room takes a deep breath, his eyes still fixed on the door that never opens, the future that never arrives. And in that moment he remembers Seneca's words, "You may delay, but time will not." The Stoic does not wait for happiness to come. He chooses it in the present, in the breath he is taking right now, in the life he is living right now, in the moment he is experiencing right now. For Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus, the Stoic life was not a life of waiting, but a life of being, a life in which every moment was a chance to let go of the chase and to finally truly live. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled amidst constant war and betrayal, understood that the relentless pursuit of happiness was a distraction from life's true purpose, the cultivation of virtue and inner peace. "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he wrote. "Realize this and you will find strength." Imagine a man standing alone in a vast empty field, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, his heart heavy with the weight of unmet expectations. He has spent his life chasing happiness, believing that each new goal, each new achievement, each new possession would finally bring him the contentment he so desperately seeks. But now, standing in the silence of the field, he begins to question everything. What if I stopped chasing? He asks himself. What if happiness was never out there but always within me? For Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic must learn to detach from the illusion that happiness was something to be attained, something to be reached, something to be earned. Instead, he taught that the only true source of contentment was the mind that could remain calm, centered, and untroubled by external circumstances. "Nowhere can you find a more peaceful and trouble-free retreat," he said, "than in your own mind." Epictetus, who had lived as a slave and endured suffering most could never imagine, knew that the man who pursued happiness through external means would forever be a slave to desire. "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life," he said. "It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Epictetus believed that the Stoic must learn to let go of the need for more, to stop measuring their worth by what they possessed or what they accomplished, to find peace in the simple act of being, in the realization that happiness was not in the future but in the present moment. "When you are offended at any man's fault," he said, "turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger." The Stoic must learn to look inward, to find contentment in the present, to embrace each moment as a complete life in itself. To let go of the illusion that happiness could ever be found in the things one chased, but only in the mind that could remain calm and at peace without them. Seneca, who had been exiled, betrayed, and forced to take his own life, knew that the man who chased happiness was like a man chasing the wind, forever running, forever grasping, forever unsatisfied. "Begin at once to live," he said, "and count each separate day as a separate life." For Seneca, the Stoic life was not about chasing happiness, but about choosing it in the present, about finding contentment in the simple things, the warmth of the sun, the breath in one's lungs, the beat of one's heart. "What need is there to weep over parts of life?" he asked. The whole of it calls for tears. The man in the field takes a deep breath, closes his eyes, and lets go of the chase. He feels the ground beneath his feet, the wind against his skin, the silence that surrounds him. And in that moment, he understands that the happiness he has been chasing was never in the things he pursued, but in the mind that could choose to be at peace, to be present, to be free. For Marcus, Epictetus, and Seneca, the Stoic life was not a life without desire, but a life without the need for more. A life in which happiness was not a destination, but a choice to let go of the chase and to finally truly live in the present moment where life and peace can finally be found.